The young woman gazed intently at the man in the expensive suit, ignoring the approaching security guards. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and a paint-stained t-shirt barely covered her thin shoulders. With trembling hands, she extended a crumpled piece of paper. "My blood is the same as his." Silence enveloped the waiting room. The millionaire swallowed hard. He had never seen this girl before, or perhaps he had. For 3 decades, Arthur Sterling built an empire of glass, steel, and silence. His chain of medical clinics was the most respected in the nation. He was the very face of private healthcare in America. Yet now, seated in a hospital armchair, facing the fragile body of his own son, he discovered that none of his connections, degrees, or billions could purchase what he most desperately needed: time. Ethan, his only heir, was being consumed from within by a rare blood condition. And even with international laboratories mobilized, no one, absolutely no one, was compatible enough to save him. Until this girl appeared out of nowhere, uninvited, unexplained, fearless, and with a simple sentence, she tore apart everything he thought he knew about his own history. This is the journey of how he confronted it all, and unearthed something no one expected. But at that moment, he had no idea what lay ahead. Arthur Sterling always lived in a hurry. He woke before dawn, slept after the numbers were finalized, and believed efficiency was a form of love not everyone recognized. At 50, he was the founder of an elite clinic empire. He owned a mansion in Greenwich, a private jet, and a calendar so packed that his son's birthdays became 5-minute phone alerts. On that Tuesday, he was on the 31st floor of his corporate headquarters in New York, reviewing international contracts, when his phone rang. "Dr. Sterling, it's Lucas's school. Tell them I'll call back later. It's urgent." The boy, he fainted. The word hung in the air. Fainted? Ethan? Arthur hung up and left without a word. His driver rushed to the car, while Arthur, for the first time in years, cancelled everything. The hospital seemed smaller than he remembered. The receptionist didn't recognize him immediately. It was a blow to his ego, and a cruel reminder that here, he wasn't the president of Sterling Healthcare Group. He was just a desperate father. "Dr. Sterling?" A doctor in a blue lab coat approached. "I'm Dr. Sarah Miller. Your son is stable for now, but we have a delicate situation." Arthur was led down long, overly lit corridors. Each step made his tie tighten around his neck. In the bed, Ethan seemed smaller, paler, almost invisible beneath the wires, tubes, and monitors. "What's wrong with him?" "We're still confirming, but the signs point to severe bone marrow failure. He needs a complex transfusion with a high level of genetic compatibility. Test my blood, his mother's, my siblings, anyone's." Dr. Miller looked at him with an expression that blended empathy and helplessness. "We've already tested. No sufficient compatibility. We're broadening the search, but it's a 1 in a million chance." Arthur gripped the edge of the bed. For the first time in a long while, he felt control slipping away, and he didn't know what to do. That's where everything began to crumble. For years, Arthur believed he was doing everything right. He gave his son the best of everything, the most expensive school in the city, piano lessons, English tutors, robotics classes. He crafted a career plan for Ethan even before he learned to tie his shoes. "You'll be better than me," he'd say, between one meeting and another, but the boy simply wanted his father near. Ethan dreamed of being an illustrator. He spent hours drawing creatures on loose sheets, but Arthur never saw value in it. "Drawing doesn't fill your belly," he'd repeat. "You were born to soar high," and with that, he pushed his son toward a future that wasn't his own. When the tests confirmed the diagnosis, an ultra-rare, degenerative, aggressive hematological condition, Arthur refused to accept it. "But how? He's always been healthy. The disease might have been silent until now," the doctor replied. "His body has been fighting for a long time." The words hammered him. Arthur tried to rationalize. He called clinic directors in Europe, activated the private laboratories he funded, summoned specialists from around the globe. But the answer was always the same. No compatibility, no safe chance, no concrete hope. Arthur intensified his efforts. He hired teams to search for donors across the entire country. He built a database of genetic profiles. He offered money, a lot of money. I'll pay whatever it takes, 10 times more. Bring me someone compatible. The problem was, even his money couldn't buy time. Ethan, growing weaker, could barely open his eyes. "Dad, is everything okay?" he whispered in a rare moment of lucidity. Arthur tried to smile. "Of course, champ. Dad will fix everything, okay?" But inside, he was in ruins. It was on the 3rd day in the ICU that a brutal fact emerged. Ethan's liver was starting to fail. His kidneys too. "If we don't find a donor within the next 36 hours, the doctor began, leaving the sentence unfinished. She didn't need to. Arthur sank into the armchair in the room. The man who founded 74 clinics in 5 states couldn't save his only son, but even at that point, he still believed he could fix everything, that all it took was one more call, one more strategy, that there was still time. The walls of room 612 no longer felt like a hospital. They were closing in on Arthur from all sides. He hadn't left there in almost 2 days. He no longer wore a suit or a watch. He just watched Ethan's heart monitor, praying the numbers wouldn't drop further. The doctor brought updates, but the words no longer registered. Low platelets, altered enzymes, blood collapsing from within. Arthur, the man of decisions, now asked permission even to hold his son's hand. In the early hours of Saturday, he was almost dozing off when his personal assistant called. "Arthur, there's a girl at reception, wants to talk to you." "What girl?" "Teenager. Simple clothes, says she can help." "Another opportunist." "I don't know. But she said something strange, that her blood is the same as your son's." Arthur descended, weary and suspicious. In the reception area, a girl in ripped jeans, an old backpack and deep-set eyes awaited him. She was smudged with paint on her fingers and sneakers. A staff member was trying to usher her away. She resisted. "Julia Hayes?" he asked, recognizing the name on the intake form. "That's me. How did you know my son's blood type?" "My mom always said my blood was rare, just like a man who—" She hesitated. "Who never wanted to know about me." Arthur felt a chill. That phrase, that voice, those brown eyes. For an instant it wasn't the girl speaking, it was his past. Valerie. A name he hadn't heard in 15 years. She had worked as a researcher in one of the Sterling med labs. Young, brilliant, intense. They had a brief affair, interrupted by her sudden resignation. He never understood why, until now. "How old are you?" he asked, his mouth dry. "Almost 15. "Your mother?" "Died 5 years ago. Left me with an aunt, but I manage." Arthur felt a lump in his throat. Dr. Miller arrived shortly after. Julia handed over a paper with her blood type, the same as Ethan's. Tests were performed, cross-analyses, a flurry of activity in the lab. Hours later, Dr. Miller returned, an envelope in her hand. "The compatibility is 99.7%. This is surreal. Only identical twins would have a rate like this." "Does that mean she can donate?" Arthur asked, already knowing the answer. "She can, and more." The doctor looked at him carefully. "We ran a paternity test. The genetic markers indicate over 92% chance of direct kinship." Arthur's world tilted. Julia, the girl who appeared out of nowhere, was his daughter. For 15 years, she existed off the radar. No parties, no presents, no father. And now, she was the only one who could save the life of the legitimate son he had raised with such diligence, but with so little affection. In the collection room, Julia sat with a cotton swab on her arm, waiting for the procedure. Arthur approached slowly. I wanted to say thank you." "You don't have to. Even so, I only came because my mum taught me that if you can help someone, you help them." "Did she talk about me?" The girl shrugged. "Sometimes, but never with anger. Only with sadness." Arthur wanted to cry but couldn't. She was like a mirror of himself. Serious gaze, direct speech, but with something he'd lost long ago. Purity. That night, as the transfusion was prepared, Arthur watched his two children, one of recognized blood, the other of forgotten blood. And for the first time, he felt the weight of all the absences, of all the birthdays that never happened, of all the questions never asked, of all the answers he never allowed himself to hear. The laboratory hallway still smelled of alcohol and fresh paint when Arthur leaned against the wall and slid to the floor. He couldn't look directly at Julia. The girl sat in one of the chairs, head bowed, waiting for the blood collection. Her arms bore thin scars, not from violence but from struggle with the cold, with abandonment, with mere survival. Arthur held the test results in his hands, a white paper with numbers screaming louder than any words. She was his daughter. "Julia," he tried to begin. She looked up but said nothing. He wanted to ask where she lived. He wanted to know if she was eating well, if she went to school, if she had dreams. But he couldn't, because the truth hurt more than any answer she could give. It was then that an almost childish thought crossed his mind. What if she had grown up with him? She would have had the same room as Ethan, the same schools, the same books. Maybe she would have shown him her drawings at the breakfast table. Maybe he would have discovered earlier that she liked to paint. But no, she grew up in the periphery with an absent aunt, selling art on the street and, according to the papers, passing through at least 3 different shelters. All this while he dined at award-winning restaurants, surrounded by accolades and headlines. "I didn't know you existed," he finally said, almost in a whisper. "I know. Most people don't know what they've left behind," Julia replied, without rancor but without mercy. Arthur took a deep breath. Maybe there was still time, not to erase the past, but not to repeat the same mistake twice. "You don't have to trust me now, but I want to be around, if you let me." She looked at him with tired eyes but didn't answer. When the medical team called to begin the collection, Julia stood up on her own. Arthur didn't know if it would work, but for the first time, he wanted to try. The transfusion room felt like a silent stage. Julia lay there, eyes fixed on the white ceiling. Beside her, Arthur watched everything with a mix of anxiety and fascination. She didn't complain, didn't ask for anything, didn't cry. She was just there, doing what was right, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. While the nurses managed the procedure, Arthur tried to approach. "You like art, right?" She nodded, an almost imperceptible movement. "I saw some of your murals online. Very good. Not all of them are mine. Sometimes I paint with others." Silence. "Your brother, Ethan, he loves to draw. He's never met you, but he already calls you my artist sister." This time, Julia offered a faint smile. "He seems nice." It wasn't much, but it was something. When the procedure ended, the doctors offered a wheelchair. She refused. She tried to stand on her own, but her legs faltered. Arthur caught her before she fell. "You don't need to prove anything, Julia. You've already done more than most people would." She slowly pulled her arm away from him. "I'm not proving anything. I'm just being me." In the following days, Arthur began visiting her discreetly at the community art center where she lived. He brought snacks, art supplies, or just listened. Each visit was a step into unknown territory, and each step hurt. He knew every office in his company, but he didn't know the name of the street where his daughter grew up. He knew the revenue of each clinic, but he had no idea how much a good box of colored pencils cost. But he was trying, and sometimes that was enough to start. The blood transfusion worked better than the doctors expected. Ethan recovered quickly. His enzymes returned to normal. His heart rate stabilized. Color returned to his face. But Arthur, he still wavered. One night in his silent mansion, he stared at a photo of Julia's mother. Valerie smiled with her eyes, and even in that old image, she seemed to know everything. He murmured into the emptiness, "Why didn't you tell me?" Deep down, he knew. Valerie knew the man he was back then. Too busy, too cold, too arrogant to care for anyone else. Now he was trying to be different. But what if it was too late? One afternoon, Julia refused to see him, said she needed some time. Arthur didn't insist. He just left an envelope with papers, photos of her brother, and a note, "Whenever you're ready, we're here." Not just out of gratitude, by choice, but doubt gnawed at him. What if she never wanted to? On a Sunday afternoon, Ethan, already home and almost fully recovered, entered his father's study. "What if she doesn't like me?" Arthur smiled. "She will. And what if she doesn't like me? Then we try again, son. Like with the clinics. Like in life." Ethan reflected for a moment. "Can I write her a letter?" Arthur nodded. The next morning, beside the regular mail, was a blue envelope scribbled with colored pencils. "Hi, sister. I want to meet you. Whenever you want." Arthur didn't know if he should cry from pride or regret, but in that note was something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Sunday dawned cloudy but dry, perfect for the pedestrians occupying the city's central elevated park, the old High Line. Arthur and Ethan arrived just before noon, as arranged. Julia had said she might be there if she changed her mind. Ethan held a blue envelope in his hands. Inside, a drawing, two siblings holding hands beneath a starry sky. He had spent the entire week on it, refining the strokes until he thought they were good enough. But now, waiting, he seemed unable to breathe properly. "What if she doesn't come?" he asked. Arthur had no answer. "Then we'll try again another day." It was then that in the distance, a familiar silhouette emerged, walking slowly among the pedestrians. Julia. She wore ripped jeans, a band t-shirt, and her inseparable paint-stained sneakers. Her loose curls fell across her face, but what drew the most attention was her expression, resolute, yet apprehensive. Ethan stood up and walked toward her. "Hi, I'm Ethan. I know," she interrupted with a shy smile. "You're taller than I imagined." He chuckled nervously. "I made you a drawing." She took the envelope, opened it carefully, and looked at it in silence for a few seconds. Then she pulled a pen from her pocket and wrote in the bottom corner of the paper, "Now there are two of us. You know how to draw well, you know. I practice. I saw your murals online. They're amazing." Julia blushed, unsure how to respond. "You could teach me if you want." She took a deep breath, thought, and replied, "I can, but only if we paint something together right now." Arthur watched from afar, motionless. As the two began to walk side by side toward one of the pillars, he felt something stir within him. It was the same feeling he'd had holding Ethan for the first time, but now it was different. Gratitude mixed with guilt and an immense desire to start anew. Reaching the mural, Julia opened her backpack, pulled out two spray cans, and handed one to Ethan. "Choose a color." "Blue," she nodded. "Blue is good. Blue has the soul of a beginning." While the two painted, laughing and exchanging ideas, Arthur slowly approached. Julia looked at him, and this time she didn't turn away. He said nothing. He just stood there, watching his two children build, in colors, what he hadn't managed with words. On the wall, the image of two hands meeting in the middle of emptiness began to emerge. Ethan wrote beside it, "Family is when blood finds heart." Julia didn't correct him, nor did she need to, because sometimes a single gesture is enough to rewrite an entire story. The mural was finished by the end of that afternoon. The two hands in the center, one small and firm, the other larger and hesitant, were now united by a blue line crossing the cracked concrete. Around them, stars in childlike strokes filled the empty space. Each represented something that had been lost, and now, perhaps, rediscovered. Arthur took a photo, but quickly put his phone away. This wasn't for showing, it was for feeling. That week, he didn't return to the office. He cancelled meetings, handed temporary control of the company to his vice presidents, and did something he had never done. He was present. He drove Ethan to school, picked him up, asked about his drawings, about his life. Sometimes he would pass by the neighborhood where Julia lived just to leave a snack, a box of paints, a handwritten note. She didn't respond to all of them, but when she did, it was with art. One day he woke up and found the side wall of his mansion painted, a new mural. Two children sitting on a rooftop looking up at a sky where instead of constellations there were words like respect, time, truth, and forgiveness. Arthur smiled. It was a silent invitation, a chance. He understood, because, in the end, mistakes don't erase bonds, but it takes courage to mend them. And sometimes the greatest form of love is starting over, even when it seems too late. Perhaps you too have someone who is part of your story, even if you haven't truly met yet. Maybe there's a letter that was never written, a hug still waiting to happen, an apology that got stuck in your throat. But the truth is, it's never too late to try. If this story touched your heart, leave a like. It helps us continue sharing stories that deserve to be felt. And if you believe that love can be born even from what was forgotten, subscribe to the channel. There's so much more we need to tell. Now tell me in the comments, what bond changed your life? Sometimes it's your story that gives someone else the strength to keep going.